Hello, welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about a movie called Inception. It is a 2010 science fiction action film. It was released on July 16, 2010. The film starts, a young man washes up on a beach and is discovered by an armed guard. He is brought to a large seaside palace where the proprietor, an elderly Japanese man, is told of his arrival. Here the only objects found on him are a handgun and a brass top. The old man allows the stranger in and gives him food, which he struggles to eat as he is reminded of a man he met in a dream. Later, Dom, Cobb, and Arthur provide protection against thieves specialized in extracting valuable information from a subject while they are dreaming. Cobb explains that when one is asleep, their mind is vulnerable to attack and he can train Sato's mind to subconsciously defend against extractors. Then we see Saito appear skeptical, but agrees to consider Cobb's proposition and leaves to join a party in the main hall. Later, Arthur and Cobb walk to an outside balcony where other partygoers mingle. Cobb assures Arthur that he will take care of the job and that he knows where Sato's secrets are. He glanced over a safe when he mentioned the word. In the meantime, Cobb approaches a woman who asks if he misses her, but can't trust her anymore. So, they retreat to a private room where Cobb ties a rope to the leg of a chair and tosses the end out of the window. Therefore, he breaks into the safe and finds Mal aiming a gun at him and Saito, and a guard holding Arthur. After that, Nash and Cobb are hooked up to a passive device, feeding them somnocin to keep them asleep and allowing dream sharing. Then, Mal shoots Arthur in the knee, but Cobb shoots him in the head and escapes under gunfire from Sato's guards. We see Arthur wakes up and instructs Nash that things are falling apart, but Cobb still has time to finish the job before he checks on the still sleeping Saito. After that, Saito opens a manila folder and finds blank pages inside. Cobb hides away to look at the contents of the real folder, but Saito is crushed and wakes up in the apartment. There, Cobb subdues Saito and reveals that not all the information he needed was in the file he stole. Saito allowed Cobb and Arthur into his mind as part of an audition. Cobb throws Saito on the floor and demands he tell them what they need to know about his expansion project. We saw that Tadashi monitors the time remaining on the passive device and plays music as a cue that their time is running out. Later, Saito, Arthur, Nash, and Cobb wake up on the train. Cobb berates Nash for designing the carpet wrong and throws Tadashi a wad of money. Saito finds himself alone in the car, save for Tadashi. Therefore, Cobb spins his brass top and takes his gun. His two children ask if their mother is with him, and Cobb tells them to behave and send presents before their grandmother hangs up. Then we see Arthur and Cobb fly to Buenos Aires to lie low in lieu of their failed job for COBOL. Nash offers Cobb a job performing Inception for him, but Cobb refuses. Later, Saito offers Cobb a way to resolve relations with COBOL, and if he succeeds, the charges keeping Cobb out of the country will be dropped. However, Arthur explains that true inspiration is impossible, and Saito needs the CEO of a competing energy conglomerate to split up his father's company. Cobb agrees to perform the job, and Saito advises Cobb to choose his team wisely. Cobb travels to Paris to meet with his father-in-law, Miles, a professor at a university. Miles introduces Cobb to Ariadne, a graduate student who is put to the test to design a maze that takes 1 minute to create and 2 to solve. When they awake, Ariadne finds they are in Cobb's warehouse workshop where Arthur is monitoring them. Cobb explains that the mind functions faster in a dream, so time moves slower. That time, when Ariadne creates a bridge from her memories, Cobb recognizes it and his subconscious reacts as a mob, separating Ariadne from Cobb until Mal appears and stabs her. At one moment, Ariadne wakes up and Cobb rushes to the restroom. He offers Eames a place on his team as a forger, but Eames is being tailed by COBOL thugs. We see Cobb escape and lead the thugs on a chase, but Saito pulls up in a limousine and picks up Cobb and Eames. After that, Eames takes them to a local chemist who experiments with somnocin. Yusuf creates a special solution with a powerful sedative to enable a 3-layered dream. Therefore, Cobb tries the sedative and is impressed with its effects, but shaken after waking from a vivid dream with Mal. Then, Arthur introduces Ariadne to paradoxes and reveals that Mal was Cobb's wife and has since passed away, but she was lovely in real life. Afterwards, the team decides to create a 3-level dream to get Robert Fisher to split up his father's company and use Peter Browning's imitation skills. Saito will accompany the team as a tourist to ensure success. Arthur and Ariadne create totems to differentiate between dreams and reality, and the team decides to perform the job on a Boeing 747 during a 10-hour flight. Saito buys the entire airline, making the job neater. At one moment, Ariadne finds Cobb dreaming alone in the workshop, hooks herself up to his machine and descends in an elevator. So, Cobb leads her through specific memories, but Ariadne discovers a hotel room with broken glass on the floor. Cobb arrives and takes Ariadne back to the elevator. However, Cobb is unable to go home due to Mal's death, but Ariadne convinces him to allow her to go with the team. Saito and Arthur announce Maurice Fisher has died and Robert will accompany the body to the States. Then we see the team board a flight and sit with Robert in a first-class cabin. Cobb returns Robert's passport and proposes a toast in his father's honor. The team is picked up by Arthur and Saito, who hold a gun to Robert as part of the kidnap ruse. Later, Robert and Saito are taken to a shared dream state of raw subconscious, where time is virtually non-existent. Robert's subconscious has been trained to fight against extraction, so the team must complete the job quickly. In the meantime, Ariadne confronts Cobb about his control over his subconscious, and he confesses that he can't keep Mal out of his head. So, they had been experimenting with dream states and wound up in limbo together, unable to leave due to the time remaining on their pace of clock. After 50 years, Cobb and Mal killed themselves on train tracks to bring them back to reality. On their wedding anniversary, Mal revealed that she filed a letter to their attorney expressing a fear for her life, framing him in the event of her death. That's the reason Cobb refuses to jump and attempts to bring her to her senses, but she ignores him and jumps to her death. With no other choice, Cobb leaves his children behind and flees the country. Later, Ariadne tries to convince Cobb that Mal's death was not his fault. Eames prepares himself as an impersonation of Browning. Cobb and Arthur interrogate Robert, and Eames tells Robert that the safe contains an alternate version of his father's will, which will dissolve the company if Robert chooses it. In Arthur's dream, Cobb uses Mr. Charles's to gain trust. He meets Robert at a bar and helps him remember that he's been kidnapped. When Robert's projection on Browning arrives, Cobb convinces Robert that it was Browning who kidnapped him by asking if he saw Browning being tortured by the kidnappers in his previous sleep level. Meanwhile, Browning confesses that he was responsible for the kidnapping, as the Second Testament left to Robert allowed him to destroy his father's empire. After that, Cobb suggests to Robert that they enter Browning's dreams to figure out what was really in the safe so that Robert can decide for himself. We see Robert agrees, now unknowingly assisting in his own inception, and the team is hooked up again, with Arthur remaining behind to watch over them and administer a synchronized kick when it is time. After that, the team splits up to draw the guards away from Robert's safe, which is heavily guarded in a mountainside fort. Moreover, Cobb goes with Ariadne, Eames travels alone, and Robert and Saito ascend a mountainside to access a blind side of the fort. At one moment of time, Yusuf loses control of the van and it tumbles down an incline, which translates into Arthur's dream as he fights off Robert's projections. There, Yusuf plays music through Arthur's headphones to warn him of the incoming kick before driving backwards off the bridge. Upon impact, the force sends Arthur in his dream flying and, as the van plummets in midair, there is a loss of gravity in Arthur's dream. Later, Saito and Robert are forced to cut their lines as an avalanche sweeps down upon them. Cobb realizes they have time for the second kick when the van hits the water off the bridge. Van drives off the bridge, 10 seconds left to impact. Dream 2, 3 minutes to synchronize the kick. Arthur struggles with a way to do this without gravity. Dream 3, 60 minutes left. We saw, with little time left, Cobb demands to know if there is another way into the fort, and Ariadne relents into telling him of a secret underground entrance that Robert and Saito can access. There, Cobb sends them there, all while Saito's condition deteriorates. They finally enter the main room where the safe is located while Cobb and Ariadne watch from a sniper's angle. Eventually, succumbing to his injuries, Saito is left to lay down, coughing blood as Robert continues forward. However, as Robert comes into Cobb's view, so does another person. Mal drops in from the ceiling and shoots Robert down before Cobb comes to his senses and shoots her. Eames is ordered to the room as Cobb and Ariadne rush to the site. After some time later, finding Robert dead, Cobb labels the mission a failure, since the only other place where Robert has gone is Limbo. Ariadne, however, convinces him that, if they go into limbo, they'll have enough time to find Robert and bring him back. Later, Eames agrees to use a defibrillator to jumpstart Robert's heart to help while Cobb and Ariadne go under. Meanwhile, in Dream Level 2, Arthur devises a unique plan. He uses phone wires to tie the team together and brings them into the elevator. So, he lines the outside of the car with explosives, timing down till the kick with the intention of using explosive force to create gravity and instigating a kick. Later, in Limbo, Cobb and Ariadne tour the deteriorating world that he and Mal once built. They see old homes and buildings before they find the one where Cobb knows Mal must be. We learned, if they find Mal, they'll find Robert because Mal will want to use something Cobb wants to bring him to her. Sure enough, they enter the apartment and Mal is waiting for them. So, she tries, again, to convince Cobb that his place is with her in their real home with their children, but Cobb reveals a terrible truth, the reason why Mal believed that her dreams were real. We see that Mal had stored away a truth that she didn't want to believe anymore, and Cobb broke into her safe to convince her that this world was not real. However, once they woke up, she would still believe it. Cobb's guilt over her death has been plaguing him ever since. He tells Mal he will stay with her in limbo if she tells him where Robert is, and Ariadne finds him on the porch and pushes him off as an improvised kick. After that, Robert comes back to life in Dream Level 3 with Eames' aid and opens his own safe, finding within an image of his bed-stricken father muttering his last word. Moreover, Robert acknowledges that his father was disappointed that he couldn't be him, but Maurice says, "No. No. I was disappointed that you tried." Later, Maurice then points to a cabinet where Robert finds the will and a paper fan his father made for him once as a child. Tearfully, Robert looks up to see his father has passed and breaks down as the van hits the water. Dream 2, Arthur hits the detonator and the explosives force the elevator down, creating artificial gravity on the team. Dream 3, a series of explosions set by Eames, rocks the fort, collapsing the main floor. Later, in Limbo, the synchronization of kicks pulls on Ariadne and she calls for Cobb to join her. Cobb says that he will stay in Limbo, but not with Mal. By this time, Saito had died and joined Limbo as well. We saw, Cobb must find him, but promises to return. Ariadne leaps off the side of the building and rides the kicks back to Dream 1. In the van, Robert wakes up and escapes the submerged van with Browning. Arthur and Ariadne share an oxygen tank with Yusuf before they escape the van, leaving Cobb. After that, Robert and Browning make it to shore where Robert reveals that his father really did want him to be his own man and that he's going to do just that and liquidate his father's company. Knowing the mission is a success, Eames drops the Browning mask. Later in Limbo, Cobb washes ashore where the armed guard finds him. He is brought to the seaside palace where the elderly Japanese man recognizes his brass top. However, Cobb recalls what he was there to do and calls to Saito, asking him to come back with him and honor their arrangement. The elderly Saito reaches for Cobb's gun. After that, Cobb wakes up on the airplane and looks around, startled, to see Arthur and Ariadne smiling at him. He looks at the now awake Saito who remembers, picking up his phone and dials. Meanwhile, the plane lands in Los Angeles and Cobb nervously moves through customs where security checks his passport, but allows him passage through, welcoming him home. We see Cobb walks past the rest of the team and Robert, who pauses a moment as if recalling a half-remembered dream. Ahead of him, Cobb sees Miles calling him over. They drive home together where Cobb hesitates before taking out his brass top. He spins it on the table in the kitchen as his children appear at the back door. Later, he runs to them, elated to see their faces again as the top continues to spin, wobbles a bit, and the screen turns to black. The very last moment of the film, the top continues to spin, wobbles a bit, which indicates that Cobb has returned to reality. The actual script, by Christopher Nolan, differs from this. The script ends with, as we see, behind him, on the table, the spinning top is still spinning. And the end. So, how was the movie? Do you like it? Then please like the video and also subscribe to the channel.